Deep in the mist-shrouded valleys of the Appalachian Mountains, where secrets cling to the ancient trees like morning dew, a young woman named Lily Taylor worked her fingers raw at Merriweather's diner. Born without the ability to speak, she communicated through scribbled notes and practiced gestures. The locals called her Ghost Girl, always present but never truly seen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you, with no family to speak of and a mysterious past that haunted her dreams. Lily had accepted her lonely existence until one stormy night when a mountain man with a face carved by both nature and violence walked through the diner door. As she served his black coffee, his eyes fell upon the crescent-shaped birthmark on her forearm, and his scarred face turned ashen as though he'd seen a ghost walking among the living. What connection bound these two lost souls? What terrible truth lay buried in the mountains that had shaped both their destinies? And could a birthmark truly be the key to unlocking a past that would change everything Lily thought she knew about herself? The first light of dawn had barely broken over the jagged Appalachian peaks when Lily Taylor's alarm shattered the silence of her tiny attic apartment. Eyes still heavy with the remnants of troubled dreams, she silenced the clock and rose from her narrow bed, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. This had been her routine for nearly 5 years now: wake before the sun, dress in silence, and make the half-mile trek to Merriweather's diner before most of Pinecrest Valley's residents had stirred from their beds. At 23, Lily lived in a world of carefully constructed routines. Routines meant safety, predictability, a life where her inability to speak wouldn't constantly remind her she was different. Mrs. Merriweather had taken a chance on her when no one else would, hiring the strange, mute girl who'd arrived in town with nothing but a backpack and a worn notebook. In return, Lily worked harder than anyone, showing up early, staying late, and never complaining. Not that she could, even if she wanted to. The crisp October air bit at her cheeks as she made her way down Main Street. Pinecrest Valley was the kind of small town that tourism brochures featured, with phrases like hidden gem and authentic mountain charm. But Lily knew the darker undercurrents that ran beneath its picturesque surface. Small towns kept secrets, and they rarely welcomed those who carried mysteries of their own. Lily's fingers unconsciously traced the crescent-shaped birthmark on her left forearm as she walked, a habit formed in childhood. The distinctive mark, shaped like a waning moon, was the only physical connection she had to whoever she might have been before the accident. The doctors had told her foster parents that the trauma had severed her vocal cords and wiped clean entire sections of her memory. No identification had been found, with the unconscious 12-year-old girl pulled from the wreckage of a car at the bottom of a ravine. No family had ever come looking. 11 years later, the only family Lily had ever known was the succession of foster homes she'd cycled through until aging out of the system at 18. After that, she drifted westward from Virginia until finding Pinecrest Valley, a place remote enough that no one asked too many questions about a girl who couldn't speak and had no past. "Morning, Ghost Girl," called Hank Bedford, the town's only postal worker, as he unlocked the post office door. The nickname had spread through town within her first month, and though Lily didn't care for it, she'd learned early that people would call her whatever they pleased. She offered a small wave in response before continuing down the street. The diner's neon sign flickered to life as she approached, the R in Merriweather's buzzing erratically as it had since she'd arrived. Mrs. Merriweather, Dorothy to those who'd known her more than 20 years, which was nearly everyone in town except Lily, was already inside, her grey hair netted tightly against her head as she counted the float for the register. "Right on time," Mrs. Merriweather called without looking up as the bell above the door announced Lily's arrival. "Sheriff Blackwood called. Says his department's having some kind of early meeting, so they'll be in at 6 instead of 7. Get the big pot started, Lily nodded, hanging her worn jacket on the hook beside the kitchen door before tying an apron around her waist. The familiar smells of grease and coffee grounds welcomed her as she moved through her morning tasks with practiced efficiency, brewing coffee, wiping down counters, filling sugar dispensers, and laying out silverware wrapped in paper napkins. By 5:45, the first patrons arrived. Sheriff Blackwood and his 3 deputies, their uniforms pressed and badges gleaming in the fluorescent lighting. They took their usual booth by the window, where the sheriff could keep an eye on the town waking up around them. "Morning, Lily," the sheriff said with a nod as she approached with her notepad. Unlike some in town, he always addressed her by name, a small courtesy she appreciated. "Just the usual for all of us, and maybe an extra side of bacon. Got a long day ahead." Lily jotted down their order, 4 specials with extra bacon, and gave a smile before heading to the kitchen. She could hear their conversation drift in snippets as she worked, something about increased bear sightings in the area, tourists getting lost on trails, and a stranger asking questions at the general store yesterday. "Big guy," Deputy Miller was saying as Lily returned with their coffee. "Had to be 6'4" at least. Face looked like it had been through a meat grinder and put back together wrong." "Probably just passing through," Sheriff Blackwood replied, nodding his thanks to Lily. "Reynolds said he was asking about old property records way up near Coldwater Creek." "Nothing up there but abandoned mining cabins and that old Black Hawk property," Deputy Parker added. "No one's lived there since the tragedy." The conversation shifted as Mrs. Merriweather emerged from the kitchen with plates balanced along her arms. Lily moved to help her, the practiced dance of service continuing as more customers filtered in with the rising sun. Loggers heading to the sawmill, teachers on their way to the elementary school, and retirees with nowhere else to be but their regular tables. By mid-morning, the breakfast rush had subsided to a trickle, and Lily was refilling salt shakers when the bell above the door announced a new arrival. The conversations throughout the diner didn't exactly stop, but they noticeably quieted as all eyes turned toward the entrance. He stood nearly a head taller than anyone else in the room, broad-shouldered and solemn-faced, wearing a flannel shirt and worn jeans that had seen better days. But it was his face that commanded attention, a landscape of old scars that had healed poorly, creating a patchwork of ridged tissue across his right cheek and jaw. A beard covered much of it, but nothing could hide the way his right eye drooped slightly, or how that side of his mouth seemed permanently fixed in a grim line. The stranger removed his weathered cap, revealing dark hair streaked with premature gray, and made his way to the counter, choosing a stool at the far end away from other patrons. Conversations slowly resumed, though Lily noticed they were more subdued, with occasional glances thrown in the newcomer's direction. Mrs. Merriweather gave Lily a pointed look from where she stood taking an order. Without hesitation, Lily grabbed her notepad and approached the stranger, whose large, calloused hands were folded on the counter before him. Up close, his scars looked like burn marks, old and faded but extensive. When he looked up at her, his eyes were a startling blue, not the pale, washed-out blue of faded denim, but the deep, rich blue of mountain lakes in summer. Those eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, though his expression remained neutral. Lily tapped her notepad with her pen and gave a questioning look. "Just coffee," he said, his voice a low rumble, rough around the edges but not unkind. "Black," she nodded and turned to fetch the coffee pot, feeling his eyes following her as she moved. When she returned to pour his coffee, his gaze had shifted to the window, where he seemed to be studying the mountains visible in the distance. "Those hills look different," he murmured, almost to himself. "But then everything does after 20 years. Lily set the coffee pot down and slid a menu toward him in case he changed his mind about ordering food. As she did so, Her sleeve rode up, exposing the crescent birthmark on her forearm. The change in the stranger was immediate and unsettling. His body went rigid, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, eyes fixed on her arm with an expression that shifted rapidly from shock to disbelief to something that looked almost like fear. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Confused, Lily followed his gaze to her birthmark. She'd been asked about it before. Children especially were curious about the distinct shape, but never with such intensity. She shrugged and pointed to herself, then made a rocking motion with her arms to indicate she'd been born with it. "How long have you been here?" The stranger's voice had taken on an urgent quality that set Lily on edge. When she didn't immediately respond, he clarified, "In Pinecrest. How long?" Lily held up 5 fingers. 5 years. When she nodded, he seemed to calculate something in his mind. "And before that? Where were you before?" She took a step back, uncomfortable with his questioning. Mrs. Merriweather, ever watchful, noticed the exchange and made her way over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her tone pleasant but carrying a note of warning. The stranger glanced between them, then seemed to realize how his intensity might appear. He visibly composed himself, taking a deliberate sip of his coffee. "Before setting it down, just making conversation," he said, though his eyes betrayed him, flicking back to Lily's birthmark before she tugged her sleeve down to cover it. Mrs. Merriweather's expression made it clear she didn't believe him, but she simply nodded. "Well, Lily doesn't speak, so the conversation's a bit one-sided. But she's the best waitress I've ever had, so we make do." She turned to Lily. "Why don't you go help table 4? I think they're ready for their check." Grateful for the intervention, Lily moved away, though she could feel the stranger watching her as she worked. When she glanced back a few minutes later, he was deep in conversation with Mrs. Merriweather, his expression serious, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. By the time Lily returned to check on him, he had left money on the counter and was gone. Mrs. Merriweather looked troubled as she tucked the bills into the register. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "That man was asking about you," she said without preamble when Lily approached. "Wanted to know your full name, where you came from. I told him we don't gossip about our staff to strangers." She hesitated, then added, "He said his name is Mason Walker. Claims he used to live up near Coldwater Creek, back before the fire." Lily frowned, the name meaning nothing to her. "There was a terrible forest fire up there about 20 years ago," Mrs. Merriweather explained, lowering her voice, though the nearest customers were well out of earshot. "Wiped out several homes, including the old Blackhawk place. The family didn't make it out, or at least that's what everyone thought." She gave Lily a significant look. "He says he's Noah Blackhawk's brother." The name stirred something in Lily. Not a memory exactly, but a feeling, like the shadow of recognition that sometimes came in dreams. She shook her head to clear it, focusing instead on wiping down the counter where the stranger had sat. "Anyway," Mrs. Merriweather continued, "I'd steer clear of him if I were you. Men who come back after 20 years usually bring trouble with them." The rest of the day passed in its usual rhythm, but Lily couldn't shake the unsettled feeling the stranger, Mason Walker, had left her with. Why had her birthmark affected him so strongly? And why did the name Blackhawk seem to echo in some empty chamber of her memory? As evening approached and the diner emptied out, Lily began her closing duties, sweeping floors, refilling condiments, and wiping down the booths. Through the window, she could see dark clouds gathering over the mountains, promising the first real storm of the season. "You go home before that rain hits," Mrs. Merriweather said, counting out Lily's tips and sliding them across the counter. "I can finish up here." Lily hesitated, not wanting to leave her employer with extra work, but Mrs. Merriweather waved her concern away. "Go on now, that sky looks mean." With a grateful nod, Lily collected her tips, grabbed her jacket, and stepped out into the rapidly cooling evening. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of approaching rain and something else, the sharp, resinous smell of pine and wood smoke. She quickened her pace as fat raindrops began to spatter the sidewalk around her. The storm broke in earnest when she was halfway home, the heavens opening with a sudden fury that had her running the last quarter mile. By the time she reached the narrow staircase that led to her apartment, she was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face and neck. Fumbling with her keys, Lily unlocked her door and stepped inside, flipping on the light switch with wet fingers. As the single overhead bulb illuminated her small living space, she froze. There, sitting in her only armchair, was Mason Walker. "Don't scream," he said, then seemed to catch himself with a grimace. "Sorry, bad joke." Lily's hand flew to her throat, an instinctive gesture that made his eyes soften with what looked like recognition. "You really can't speak, can you?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been at the diner. She shook her head slowly, her body tense as she assessed the distance to the door. As if reading her thoughts, he raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you. I could never." He took a deep breath. "I think you're my niece." The words hung in the air between them, impossible, and yet delivered with such conviction that Lily found herself unable to move, rooted to the spot as water dripped from her clothes onto the worn floorboards. "Your birthmark," Mason continued, gesturing to her arm. "It's identical to my sister-in-law's, to Maria's. She had the same crescent moon in the same place." He swallowed hard. "Everyone said the whole family died in the fire, Noah, Maria, and their little girl, Emily, but they never found Emily's remains." Lily's mind raced, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he must hear it. She'd been told she was found alone in a car accident, not a fire. But then, she'd been told many things over the years, by people who knew little of her history beyond the paperwork that accompanied her from one foster home to the next. Emily would be 23 now, Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. She'd have been just 12 when the fire happened. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded photograph, holding it out to her. "This is the last picture I have of them, of all of us, together." With trembling fingers, Lily took the photo. It showed a family of 4 standing on a porch, mountains rising behind them. A tall, dark-haired man had his arm around a beautiful woman with olive skin and long black hair. In front of them stood a boy of perhaps 14 and a little girl of around 8, both with their mother's coloring and their father's smile. The woman's left arm was around the girl's shoulders, her sleeve pushed up just enough to reveal a crescent-shaped birthmark identical to Lily's own. "That was taken 4 years before the fire," Mason said quietly. "Before Noah and I had our falling out. Before—" He gestured to his scarred face. "Before this." Lily stared at the image, searching for any hint of recognition, any sense that these people were connected to her. The little girl in the photo, Emily, had the same dark eyes as the face Lily saw in the mirror each morning, but beyond that, she felt no spark of familiarity. She looked up at Mason questioningly, then gestured around her small apartment with a helpless shrug. If what he was suggesting was true, why had no one come looking for her? Why had she grown up alone, passed from one indifferent home to another? "I know you must have questions," Mason said, correctly interpreting her gesture. "God knows I do, too. I've spent the last month tracking you down from the moment I heard rumors that a mute girl with Maria's birthmark was working at a diner in Pinecrest." He leaned forward, his scarred face earnest in the harsh overhead light. "But there's something you need to understand. If you are Emily, and I believe with every fiber of my being that you are, then the fire that supposedly killed your family wasn't an accident. and whoever set it might not be too happy to learn that you survived. Thunder cracked outside as Lily stared at the photograph in her hands, rain lashing against the single window of her apartment. The little girl in the image, Emily, smiled back at her with eyes that held no knowledge of the tragedy that would soon engulf her world. Lily's fingers traced the outline of the family, lingering on the woman's birthmark that mirrored her own. Mason watched her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, as if he was searching for something in her face, confirmation perhaps, or recognition. "You don't remember any of it, do you?" he asked finally, his voice barely audible above the storm. Lily shook her head and reached for the notepad she kept on the small table by the door. Her hands still trembled as she wrote, "They told me I was in a car accident when I was 12. Virginia. No ID, no family came." Mason read the note, his brow furrowing deeply. "Virginia's 3 states away, but that timing, it fits. The fire was in June. If someone took you, if you somehow escaped." He trailed off, lost in calculation. "A car accident could explain why you can't speak. The trauma." Lily wrote again, "Who would take me?" Mason's expression darkened. "That's what I've been trying to figure out for 20 years. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What do you know about the Black Hawk Mining Company?" Lily shrugged and shook her head. "It was my grandfather's company, then my father's. When the old man died, he left it to Noah and me jointly." Mason's hand unconsciously moved to the scarred side of his face. "Noah wanted to shut it down, said the environmental impact was too great, that we should invest in renewable energy instead. I disagreed. The fight got ugly." He fell silent for a moment, lost in memory. 3 months after our last argument, the fire happened. The official report said it was a lightning strike, followed by an explosion from a propane tank. Your parents, Noah and Maria, were found in the ruins, but they never found you or your brother, Tyler. Lily's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "Brother?" she wrote, the single word underlined twice. "Tyler was 16 when it happened," Mason said, tapping the boy in the photograph. "He'd be 32 now if he's still alive." He hesitated. "There was blood found in his room, enough that investigators assumed he hadn't survived, but like you, no remains were ever recovered." Lily sank into the chair opposite Mason, the implications washing over her like the rain battering her window. A family she couldn't remember, a brother who might still be out there, a life before the emptiness that had defined her existence for as long as she could recall. "Why now?" she wrote. "Why look for me after 20 years? Mason's face grew grim. "Because 3 months ago, someone tried to kill me. Broke into my cabin up in the Blue Ridge Mountains and set it ablaze while I was sleeping." He gestured to a fresh scar on his forearm. "I barely got out, and as I was dragging myself through the woods, half conscious from smoke inhalation, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A car parked down the service road with the Black Hawk Mining logo on its side." He leaned forward intensely. "The company was dissolved after Noah's death. No one should be driving vehicles with that logo. Someone's revived it, using our family name, and they're tying up loose ends. When I started digging, I found mining permits being approved under the Black Hawk name for land that should be protected by conservation laws. Land that just happens to contain some of the richest rare earth mineral deposits in North America." Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white for an instant. In that moment, Lily saw something in Mason's face, a mingling of fear and determination that sent a chill down her spine. The only people who could legally challenge these permits would be surviving Black Hawk heirs, he continued. "Which is why I think someone's making damn sure there aren't any." Lily stared at him, trying to process everything. Part of her wanted to believe this stranger, to accept that she had a past, a family, an identity beyond the lonely existence she'd carved out for herself. But another part, the cautious, suspicious part that had helped her survive, warned her that trusting too easily could be dangerous. "Proof," she wrote. "Need more than birthmark and old photo." Mason nodded, seeming to respect her skepticism. "Fair enough." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I had a feeling you might not remember, might not believe me. So, I brought this." Lily took the envelope cautiously and opened it to find several folded documents. The first was a birth certificate for Emily Rose Blackhawk, born to Noah and Maria Blackhawk at Ridgeview Memorial Hospital in Pinecrest, Virginia on April 17, 2002. The second was a newspaper clipping from the Pinecrest Gazette, dated June 30, 2014, with the headline, "Local Family Perishes in Tragic Mountain Fire." The article detailed how the home of prominent local businessman Noah Blackhawk had been struck by lightning, causing a fire that claimed the lives of the entire family. It quoted Mason briefly, describing him as the estranged brother who had been living out of state at the time. A family photograph accompanied the article, the same one Mason had shown her. The third document was a medical record from Virginia Commonwealth Children's Hospital, dated July 15, 2014. It detailed the admission of an unidentified female child, approximately 12 years old, found at the scene of a single vehicle accident on a remote road in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The report noted severe trauma to the throat and vocal cords, as well as a concussion resulting in memory loss. Under distinguishing marks, it listed crescent-shaped birthmark on left forearm. Lily's hands shook as she read. The date on the medical record was just 2 weeks after the fire. The pieces were beginning to align in a way that terrified her. "Who took me from the fire?" she wrote, her handwriting becoming less steady. "That's what I need to find out," Mason said grimly. "And more importantly, why did they dump you in Virginia instead of just—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air between them. Lily stood abruptly, needing to move, to process. She paced the small confines of her apartment, the document still clutched in her hand. If what Mason was saying was true, then her entire life had been built on a foundation of lies and omissions. She wasn't an orphan who'd slipped through the cracks of an overburdened system. She was a survivor, hidden away while someone murdered her family and stole her identity. A sudden thought struck her, and she quickly wrote, "My brother. Where would he be?" Mason's expression tightened. "I don't know. I've been searching for both of you since I realized you might have survived. Tyler was always smart, too smart for his own good sometimes. If he got away that night, he might have gone to ground, changed his name, tried to disappear." Another thought occurred to her, more chilling than the first. She wrote, "If I am Emily and someone finds out I'm alive, they'll come for you," Mason finished bluntly. "Which is why we need to leave Pinecrest tonight." Lily's eyes widened in alarm. Leave? Everything she knew was here, her job, her apartment, the quiet life she'd built from nothing. Small and lonely as it might be, it was hers. And yet, if Mason was telling the truth, none of it was real. She was Emily Blackhawk, daughter of Noah and Maria, sister to Tyler, niece to the scarred man sitting in her apartment. She had a past, a history, perhaps even a future that was more than endless days serving coffee at Merriweather's diner. "Where would we go?" she wrote. "I have a friend in Burlington. Ex-military, keeps to himself. His place is secure, off the grid. We can stay there while we figure out our next move." Mason checked his watch. "Pack only what you need. We should be on the road within the hour before this storm gets any worse." Lily hesitated, then wrote, "How do I know I can trust you?" Mason looked at her steadily, his scarred face solemn in the dim light. "You don't, but ask yourself this. If I meant you harm, Why would I come to you with all this? Why not just eliminate the threat you might pose, like someone tried to do to me? It was a cold logic, but Lily couldn't argue with it. Still, she wrote, "The sheriff. We could tell him, Masons." Laugh was bitter. Small-town law enforcement against whoever has the resources to resurrect a defunct mining company and systematically eliminate its heirs? Besides, for all we know, local officials could be in on it. These mining permits didn't get approved in a vacuum. Lily chewed her lip, weighing her options. Stay in Pinecrest, continue her life as Lily Taylor, and pray that Mason was either mistaken or that whoever had tried to kill him wouldn't connect the dots to her. Or leave with this stranger who claimed to be her uncle, chase a past she couldn't remember, and possibly put herself directly in danger's path. The storm intensified outside, sheets of rain turning the view from her window into a watery blur. Finally, she nodded and moved toward her small closet, pulling out a duffel bag. "Pack warm clothes," Mason advised. "Where we're going, the nights get cold." As Lily gathered her few possessions, clothes, toiletries, the small amount of cash she kept hidden in an old coffee tin, her mind raced with questions. If she was truly Emily Blackhawk, what did that mean for her future? Could her voice be restored with proper medical treatment? And what of her brother? Was Tyler still alive? And if so, where had he been all these years? She was folding a sweater when a noise outside her door made her freeze. Mason heard it too, his body tensing as he moved silently to position himself against the wall beside the entrance. He motioned for her to stay back, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a hunting knife. The doorknob turned slowly, testing. Lily realized with a jolt of fear that in the shock of Mason's revelations, she hadn't locked the door behind her when she entered. The door began to swing open, and Mason prepared to strike. But it wasn't an assassin who stepped through the door. It was Mrs. Merriweather, a concerned expression on her face and a plastic container in her hands. "Lily, honey, I brought you some of that chicken soup you like since you got caught in the—" Her words cut off abruptly as she caught sight of Mason with his knife raised. She screamed, dropping the container, soup splattering across the floor. "Wait!" Mason lowered the knife quickly. "Mrs. Merriweather, I can explain." But the older woman was already backing away, fumbling in her purse. "Stay back. I've got pepper spray and I've already called the sheriff. He told me to check on Lily when I saw you following her from the diner." Mason cursed under his breath. "We don't have time for this. Sheriff will be here any minute, and once officials get involved, our chances of getting away clean drop to zero." Lily moved quickly to Mrs. Merriweather's side, touching her arm gently to calm her. She gave Mason a warning look before leading her employer to sit on the edge of the bed. Taking her notepad, she wrote rapidly, "He's not hurting me. He might be my uncle. I might have a family." Mrs. Merriweather read the note, confusion replacing fear on her face. "What are you talking about, child?" "Her real name is Emily Blackhawk," Mason said, sheathing his knife as a gesture of good faith. "She's my brother's daughter. The family everyone thought died in the fire 20 years ago." "Blackhawk?" Mrs. Merriweather's eyes widened. "But that's impossible. That poor family." "Everyone said." "Not everyone made it out," Mason corrected. "But Emily did. Someone took her from the fire, drove her to Virginia, and then either abandoned her or staged an accident. She was found with injuries that left her unable to speak and with no memory of who she was." Mrs. Merriweather looked to Lily, searching her face. "Is this true? Do you believe him?" Lily nodded hesitantly, then showed Mrs. Merriweather the documents Mason had brought. The older woman examined them carefully, her expression growing more troubled with each page. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "All these years, you were right under everyone's nose." She looked up at Mason. "But why are you here now, after all?" This time, before Mason could answer, the sound of a siren cut through the storm outside, growing closer. "We need to go," Mason urged. "Now!" Mrs. Merriweather stood, surprisingly resolute. The back staircase. It leads down to the alley. My car is parked there, take it. She reached into her purse and pulled out her keys. It's not much, but it'll get you wherever you need to go. Lily stared at her in surprise. This was the woman who had cautioned her against Mason just hours ago, and now she was helping them flee? Sensing her confusion, Mrs. Merriweather squeezed her hand. I knew your mother, child. Maria used to come into my husband's hardware store before the fire. Kindest woman I ever met. If you're her daughter, then God has given you a second chance at the life that was stolen from you. Her eyes hardened. And if someone murdered that family and tried to cover it up, they deserve whatever's coming to them. The siren stopped directly outside the building. Through the window, they could see the flashing lights of the sheriff's cruiser illuminating the raindrops like falling embers. Go! Mrs. Merriweather urged, pressing the keys into Lily's hand. I'll stall them. Lily embraced the older woman, tightly, then grabbed her half-packed bag. Mason was already at the back door, checking the stairwell. He nodded that it was clear. One more thing, Mrs. Merriweather called softly as they prepared to leave. If you find who did this, who took your voice and your family, make them pay. The cold determination in the usually gentle woman's eyes sent a shiver down Lily's spine. She nodded once, then followed Mason down the dark stairwell as boots thudded on the main stairs at the front of the building. The rain was still coming down in sheets when they reached the alley. Mrs. Merriweather's ancient Buick sat beneath. A flickering security light, beads of water cascading down its faded blue exterior. Mason took the keys from Lily and unlocked it quickly. Get in, he urged, throwing their bags in the back seat. Keep your head down until we're out of town. Lily slid into the passenger seat, heart pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard over the storm. As Mason started the engine, she caught sight of a figure emerging onto the back landing of her apartment. Sheriff Blackwood, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a moment, she thought he'd spotted them, but then Mrs. Merriweather appeared behind him, gesturing animatedly in the opposite direction. Mason reversed out of the alley and turned onto a side street, avoiding Main Street with its bright lights and potential witnesses. The Wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour as they navigated the dark streets of Pinecrest, each turn taking Lily further from the only life she'd known as an adult. We'll take back roads, Mason said, his eyes constantly checking. The rearview mirror. Longer, but safer. Less chance of being spotted. Lily nodded, then impulsively reached for her bag in the back seat. She retrieved her notepad and wrote by the glow of the dashboard. If I'm Emily, and someone took me from the fire, who and why let me live? Mason glanced at the note, his expression grim in the green instrument light. Those are the million-dollar questions, and I think the answers lie back at Coldwater Creek, where it all began. He turned onto a narrow forest road that headed northeast, away from town. That's where we're going after Burlington. Back to what's left of the Blackhawk property. Lily leaned back in her seat, watching the rain-slicked road disappear beneath them as they climbed into the mountains. Somewhere ahead lay answers to questions she hadn't even known to ask until tonight. Somewhere ahead, perhaps, lay the truth of who she really was. Not Lily Taylor, the mute waitress, but Emily Blackhawk, survivor of a tragedy that had claimed her family. And somewhere, perhaps, was a brother who might have been searching for her all these years, just as she had been unconsciously searching for herself. As they crested a ridge, the lights of Pinecrest Valley winked out behind them, swallowed by the storm and the mountains. Lily felt a curious mixture of fear and hope rising in her chest. Fear of the unknown dangers that clearly lay ahead, but hope that at the end of this journey she might finally discover not just who she was, but who she was meant to be. The rain continued to fall, washing away the past as the old Buick carried them into an uncertain future, guided only by the headlights cutting through the darkness and the shared determination to uncover a truth buried for 20 long years. Dawn broke over the mountains in pale watercolor strokes as Mrs. Merriweather's Buick climbed the winding road toward Burlington. The storm had subsided to a gentle mist that clung to the evergreens and turned the asphalt to a glossy black ribbon. Mason drove with grim determination, his scarred profile illuminated by the growing light. Beside him, Lily dozed fitfully, her dreams filled with fragments of images that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. A wooden porch swing, the scent of pine sap, a woman's lilting voice singing a lullaby in Spanish. She woke with a start, as the car slowed, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous night came rushing back. They were pulling into a gas station, the only sign of civilization they'd seen in over an hour. "Need to fill up," Mason explained, eyeing the fuel gauge that hovered near empty. "And we should ditch this car soon. Sheriff Blackwood will have reported it stolen by now." Lily nodded, reaching for her notepad. Her hand froze halfway to her bag as she caught sight of a police cruiser parked at the far end of the lot. Not from Pinecrest, this one bore the insignia of the State Highway Patrol. She tapped Mason's arm urgently and jerked her head toward the threat. "Stay in the car," he murmured, pulling his cap low over his face. "Keep your head down." He pumped gas quickly, body angled away from the cruiser, where a trooper sat filling out paperwork. Lily hunched down in her seat, heart hammering against her ribs. When Mason went inside to pay, she watched through the window as he moved with casual confidence, even exchanging a brief nod with the trooper who entered as he was leaving. It was only when they were back on the road that she allowed herself to breathe normally again. "How much farther?" she wrote, showing Mason the notepad. "About 20 miles, he replied. "My friend's place is outside Burlington proper, up near the old fire watchtower." He glanced at her. "Try to get some more rest. We've got a long day ahead and you barely slept." But sleep was impossible now. Lily's mind was too full of questions, her body too wired with adrenaline. Instead, she watched the landscape transform as they climbed higher, dense forest giving way to rocky outcroppings, the road narrowing until it was barely wide enough for the Buick's wide frame. Eventually, Mason turned onto what looked like a logging trail, the car bouncing over ruts and exposed roots as they penetrated deeper into the wilderness. After nearly 15 minutes on the rough track, a small cabin appeared ahead, nestled into the hillside, as if it had grown there naturally. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and a battered pickup truck was parked beside a woodpile. Before they'd even come to a complete stop, the cabin door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch with a shotgun held casually but unmistakably at the ready. "That's far enough," he called, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. Mason stopped the car and rolled down his window. "It's me, Ellis, Mason Walker." The man, Ellis, didn't lower his weapon. "Wasn't expecting company, Walker, and I damn sure wasn't expecting you to bring a girl." "She's my niece," Mason replied, an edge to his voice, "and we need your help." Ellis studied them for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable beneath a salt and pepper beard. Finally, he lowered the shotgun slightly. "Blackhawk's kid? The one you've been looking for?" "One of them, yes." Ellis's gaze shifted to Lily, sizing her up with eyes that missed nothing. "She don't look like a Blackhawk." "She takes after her mother," Mason said. "Are you going to let us in, or should we have this reunion in your front yard?" With a grunt that might have been amusement, Ellis stepped back and gestured them inside with his shotgun barrel. "Might as well, coffee's hot." The cabin's interior was Spartan but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, kitchen area and sitting space, plus 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. Gun racks lined one wall, while topographical maps covered another. The furnishings were simple and functional, like the man himself. Ellis set his shotgun aside, but kept it within reach as he poured 3 mugs of coffee from a pot that bubbled on the wood stove. "So you finally found her," he said, handing Mason a steaming mug. "Where was she?" "Pinecrest Valley," Mason replied. "Working as a waitress at a diner of all places, living under the name Lily Taylor." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "Right under your nose, then. She remember anything?" Mason shook his head. "Nothing, and she can't speak. Injury to her vocal cords. From whatever happened after the fire." He looked at Lily. "Ellis was with me the night I went back to the house after the fire crews had left." Ellis's expression darkened. "Never seen anything like it. Place was still smoking. We were looking for bodies, or survivors. Found your brother and his wife in what was left of the master bedroom." He took a long sip of coffee. "Never found the kids, though. Just blood in the boys' room." Lily wrapped her hands around her mug, drawing comfort from its warmth as the men discussed her family's death with the clinical detachment of those who had processed their grief long ago. She reached for her notepad and wrote, "You think my brother is still alive too?" Ellis read the note, then looked to Mason. "You haven't told her your theory." "It's more than a theory now," Mason said. He set down his coffee and turned to Lily. "I've been tracking unusual financial activity tied to the old Blackhawk mining holdings for years. 6 months ago, I found something, a shell company that had been quietly acquiring mineral rights in the area around Coldwater Creek. The company was registered to a T.J. Black." Lily's eyes widened at the initials. "Tyler James Blackhawk," Mason confirmed. "It could be a coincidence, but—" "You think my brother is behind the mining company?" Lily wrote, her handwriting betraying her shock. "Not just behind it, he is the company," Mason replied. "And he's been systematically buying up rights to land that should have passed to him. And you as Noah's heirs, land that contains some of the richest deposits of rare earth elements in North America." Ellis leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Elements used in everything from smartphones to military hardware, worth billions to the right buyers." Lily's mind reeled. If Tyler was alive, why had he never looked for her? Why operate in secret? All these years, she wrote, if he's buying land that should be ours anyway, why not just claim his inheritance? Mason and Ellis exchanged a look that sent a chill down Lily's spine. "Because officially, Tyler Blackhawk is dead," Mason said carefully. "And the dead can't inherit. But more importantly, the dead can't be prosecuted for murder." The implication hung in the air like smoke, too terrible to comprehend. Lily shook her head violently, rejecting the unspoken accusation. "I didn't want to believe it either," Mason said softly, "but the evidence points that way. The fire wasn't an accident, and it wasn't started by some corporate rival trying to eliminate Noah. The accelerant was started in Tyler's room, where they found the blood. His blood, we thought at the time. Perfect way to fake his own death. And eliminate the parents who stood in his way. No, Lily wrote, the single word underlined 3 times. He was 16. Old enough to know that his father was planning to shut down the mines permanently, Mason counted. Old enough to have discovered the value of what lay beneath that land, and old enough to be angry about being denied what he saw as his birthright. Lily's hand trembled as she wrote, "Then why am I alive? Why not kill me too?" Mason's face softened. "That's the one piece that never fit. If Tyler set the fire, why were you taken from the scene? Why leave you alive when it would have been simpler to—" He stopped, unwilling to finish the thought. "It's why I've never gone public with my suspicions. Why I've spent 20 years searching for both of you, hoping there was another explanation." Ellis cleared his throat. "There's another possibility. The girl wasn't part of the plan. Someone else was there that night. Someone who got to her before the fire consumed everything." A memory flickered at the edges of Lily's consciousness, strong arms carrying her, a voice whispering desperate reassurances, the acrid smell of smoke. She closed her eyes, trying to capture the fragment before it slipped away. But it was gone, as quickly as it had come. "What do we do now?" she wrote. "We find your brother," Mason said firmly. "One way or another, Tyler has the answers we need. And according to my sources, he's back in the area, overseeing a new mining survey near the old Blackhawk property." Ellis frowned. "That land's protected now, part of the national forest." "On paper, yes. But money talks, and with the current demand for rare earth elements, certain officials are willing to look the other way, especially when the company seeking the permits appears legitimate and well-connected." Mason turned to Lily. "We need to confront him, find out the truth about what happened that night, and we need proof that you are who I believe you are." "DNA test," Lily suggested. "Eventually, yes. But those take time, and they leave a paper trail. We need something more immediate," Mason considered. "There might be something at the old house site, something that survived the fire and could help establish your identity." Ellis shook his head. "Nothing left there but charred timber and bad memories, Walker. I told you that 20 years ago." "Not quite nothing," Mason replied. "Noah built a safe room beneath the house, concrete walls, steel door. If anything survived, it would be there." "And if Tyler is there when we arrive?" Ellis asked, voicing the question Lily was thinking. Mason's expression hardened. "Then we get answers one way or another. But first, we need to rest and prepare. We leave at nightfall." The rest of the day passed in tense planning. Ellis produced maps of the area around Coldwater Creek, marking Forest Service roads and hiking trails that would allow them to approach the old Blackhawk property undetected. Mason cleaned a pair of handguns with practiced efficiency, offering one to Lily, who refused with a firm shake of her head. "I hope we won't need these," he told her, "but hope isn't a strategy." As dusk approached, Ellis loaded supplies into his pickup: flashlights, rope, tools for clearing debris, and a first aid kit. 2-hour drive to the trailhead, he announced. Then about a mile hike to the old property. Moon's waning, so we'll have decent darkness for cover. Lily changed into clothes more suitable for hiking. Jeans, sturdy boots borrowed from Ellis's late wife. She was about your size, never could bear to give her things away. And a dark flannel shirt. As she braided her hair to keep it out of her face, she caught sight of her reflection in a small mirror hanging by the door. For a moment she didn't recognize herself. The woman staring back looked more determined, more purposeful than the reserved waitress who had moved invisibly through Pinecrest Valley for 5 years. Emily, she thought, testing the name in her mind. It felt foreign, like clothes that didn't quite fit. Yet something about it resonated deep within her, stirring echoes of a life she couldn't remember living. When she emerged from the bedroom, Mason and Ellis were checking a handheld GPS unit. They looked up as she approached, and something in Mason's expression shifted, a flash of recognition quickly masked. "You look like her," he said quietly. "Like Maria." Before Lily could respond, Ellis interrupted. "We need to move. Storm's coming in from the west. Want to be down from the mountain before it hits." The drive was largely silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts as the pickup navigated increasingly remote roads. Lily watched the darkening forest slip past her window, wondering what waited for them at the end of this journey. Answers, certainly, but would they be answers she could live with? They parked at an unmarked trailhead, the pickup hidden beneath a canopy of spruce trees. Ellis distributed headlamps, but cautioned against using them unless absolutely necessary. "Moonlight's enough once your eyes adjust," he said. "Light travels a long way in these mountains at night." The hike was challenging, the trail little more than a game path in places. Lily followed Mason's broad back, placing her feet carefully on the uneven ground, alert to every sound in the forest around them. The air grew cooler as they climbed, carrying the metallic scent of approaching rain. After nearly an hour of steady hiking, Mason halted abruptly, raising a hand for silence. Ahead, through a break in the trees, a faint glow was visible, light from a building or vehicle where no light should be. "Someone's there," Ellis whispered, unnecessarily. They continued with greater caution, moving off the trail to approach, through denser underbrush. The light grew stronger, and soon they could make out its source, portable construction floodlights illuminating what had once been the Black Hawk family home. Where Lily had expected to find ruins, she instead saw activity. A temporary shelter had been erected over part of the foundation, and equipment that looked like ground-penetrating radar was arrayed around the perimeter. Two men in hard hats moved between the machines, taking readings and making notes on tablets. A white SUV with tinted windows was parked nearby, its engine running. "Survey team," Mason muttered. "They're mapping the underlying mineral deposits." Ellis pointed to a logo on the side of the SUV, a stylized Black Hawk with wings spread above the letters BMC. "Black Hawk Mining Company," Mason confirmed grimly. "He's not even trying to hide it anymore." As they watched from the shelter of the trees, the driver's door of the SUV opened, and a man stepped out. Tall and lean, he moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to command. Though distance and shadow obscured his features, there was something in his bearing that made Lily's heart stutter in her chest, a half-remembered familiarity, like a word on the tip of her tongue. Mason's breath caught. "Tyler," he whispered, the name carrying equal measures of disbelief and certainty. The man approached one of the technicians, examining the tablet the worker held out. His voice carried through the clear mountain air, deep, authoritative, with the hint of a southern drawl that had been polished away by education. "How deep does the vein run?" he asked. "At least 200 feet, sir," the technician replied. "Preliminary tests show concentrations well above our threshold for commercial viability." "Good. Have your team ready to move to the north section tomorrow. I want this entire property mapped by the end of the week." The man looked up suddenly, as if sensing their presence, his gaze sweeping the tree line where they hid. "Did you hear something?" The three intruders froze, barely breathing. After a tense moment, the man shook his head and returned his attention to the tablet. "Make sure the perimeter sensors are active before you leave. I don't want any hikers or rangers stumbling onto the site." "Yes, Mr. Black." Mason turned to Lily, his expression a complex mixture of vindication and sorrow. "That's him," he whispered. "That's your brother." Lily stared at the distant figure, searching for any sense of connection, any flicker of recognition. This stranger, this man who had risen from the ashes of her forgotten past, might hold all the answers she sought. But as she watched him direct the survey team with cool efficiency, she felt only a growing unease. "If he killed our parents," she wrote in the dim light, "what will he do when he finds out I'm alive?" Mason's reply was grim. "That's what we're here to find out, and if necessary, to stop him before he can finish what he started 20 years ago." A rumble of thunder echoed across the mountains, and the first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering against the leaves overhead. The storm they'd been racing against had arrived, bringing with it the promise of violence, both from the skies and perhaps from the blood that bound them all together in this forgotten corner of the mountains. Rain fell in heavy sheets, obscuring visibility and drowning out all sounds except the persistent drumming on the forest canopy. Lily, Mason, and Ellis huddled beneath a rocky overhang, watching as the survey team hastily packed up their equipment. The workers moved with the efficiency of men accustomed to sudden mountain storms, securing instruments in waterproof cases and dismantling the temporary shelter with practiced speed. Tyler, or TJ Black as he was now known, supervised the operation from beneath a black umbrella, occasionally barking orders that were lost in the downpour. Even from this distance, Lily could see the resemblance to the boy in the photograph Mason had shown her. The same tall, lean build. The same way of standing with weight shifted slightly to one side. But the carefree smile of the 14-year-old was nowhere to be seen on this man's face. "What's the play here?" Ellis muttered, water dripping from the brim of his cap. "Can't exactly walk up and introduce ourselves with his crew around." Mason's eyes never left his nephew. "We wait. Once they're gone, we check out the site, look for the entrance to the safe room. If we're lucky, Tyler will leave with them." But luck wasn't on their side. As the workers finished loading equipment into a mud-spattered truck, Tyler shook hands with the lead technician and watched them depart down the access road. Then, instead of following in his SUV, he returned to the ruins of the house, seeking shelter beneath what remained of the front porch overhang. "He's staying," Ellis observed unnecessarily. Mason nodded grimly. "Probably has a camp set up inside what's left of the structure. Makes sense. He'd want to keep an eye on the site personally." Lily touched Mason's arm, drawing his attention to her notepad where she'd written, "We can't just wait out the storm. He could be here for days." "She's right," Ellis said, "and I don't like being exposed on this mountainside with weather like this. Flash floods, lightning strikes, hypothermia, plenty of ways to die out here without someone shooting you." Mason weighed their options, conflict evident in his scarred features. Finally, he came to a decision. "We approached him directly. Just me and Lily. Ellis, you circle around to the back of the property. If things go sideways, you'll be our ace in the hole." Ellis looked skeptical but nodded. "What's the signal if you need extraction?" 3 quick flashes with this. Mason produced a small tactical flashlight from his pocket. "Any other pattern means stay put." The older man grunted in acknowledgement, then touched Lily's shoulder. "Be careful, girl. Family ain't always what it's cracked up to be." With that cryptic warning, he disappeared into the rain-soaked underbrush. Moving with surprising stealth for a man his age, Mason turned to Lily. "You ready for this?" She wasn't. Not remotely. The prospect of confronting a brother she couldn't remember, who might have murdered their parents, sent cold fear trickling down her spine. But she needed answers more than she needed safety. She needed to know who she was and why her life had been stolen from her. She nodded firmly. "Stay behind me," Mason instructed, checking that his pistol was secure but accessible in his waistband. "Let me do the talking first." Together they emerged from the tree line and approached the ruins of what had once been the Blackhawk family. Home. In the harsh glare of the single floodlight Tyler had left operational, Lily could make out the stone foundation and fragments of load-bearing walls, blackened by old fire and weathered by 2 decades of mountain seasons. It was less a structure now than a skeleton, the bare bones of a life she should have known. They were halfway across the clearing when Tyler sensed their presence. He spun around, hand moving instinctively to his hip where, Lily realized with a jolt, a holstered gun was partially concealed beneath his rain jacket. "That's close enough," he called, voice taut with warning. "This is private property." Mason raised his hands to shoulder height, palms forward in a placating gesture. "Hello, Tyler. It's been a long time." Even through the curtain of rain, Lily could see the shock that registered on the man's face, followed quickly by wariness. "Mason?" he replied, recognition and disbelief mingling in his voice. "Mason Walker?" "In the flesh," Mason confirmed, continuing his slow advance. "You've done well for yourself, I see. T.J. Black, CEO of the new and improved Blackhawk Mining Company. Quite a step up from being declared legally dead." Tyler's hand remained near his weapon, but his posture relaxed slightly. 20 years, without so much as a Christmas card, and you show up in the middle of a storm to critique my career choices? What do you want, Mason?" "Answers," Mason replied simply. They were close enough now that Lily could see Tyler clearly. A handsome man in his early 30s, with their mother's olive complexion and their father's strong jawline. His dark hair was cropped short and already silvering at the temples, giving him a distinguished air that belied his age. Starting with what really happened the night of the fire, Tyler's expression hardened. The night you think I murdered our parents, you mean? That's why you're here, isn't it? To finally confront the monster you've built me into in your mind. His gaze shifted suddenly, noticing Lily for the first time as she moved out from behind Mason. "Who's this?" Mason placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "Don't you recognize her, Tyler? Look closely." Confusion flickered across Tyler's face as he studied her, giving way to a dawning, impossible realization. "It can't be," he whispered, his composure cracking for the first time. "Emily." The sound of her true name on her brother's lips sent a shock through Lily's system, a jolt of recognition that bypassed conscious thought. She nodded slowly, watching as a complex storm of emotions transformed his features. "How?" Tyler breathed, taking an unconscious step forward. "They told me you were dead. They showed me your body." Mason's hand tightened on Lily's shoulder. "Who told you that, Tyler? Who showed you her body?" But Tyler wasn't listening to Mason anymore. His attention was fixed entirely on Lily, his eyes searching her face with desperate intensity. "It is you," he said, his voice breaking. "The birthmark, Mom's birthmark." He took another step, then stopped as Mason shifted protectively. "What happened to you? Where have you been all these years?" Lily reached for her notepad, but before she could write a response, Mason spoke. "She can't talk. Whatever happened to her after the fire damaged her vocal cords, and she doesn't remember anything from before. Not you, not your parents, not what happened that night." "After the fire," Tyler repeated, confusion evident. "What are you talking about? Emily was taken weeks before the fire. They said it was a kidnapping gone wrong, that she'd been killed during the abduction." Mason and Lily exchanged startled glances. This wasn't the narrative either of them had expected. "Who told you this?" Mason demanded. "Who are they?" Tyler's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You really don't know, do you? After all these years of suspecting me, you never figured out who was really behind it all." He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Come inside, this isn't a conversation we should have in the rain." He led them to what remained of the house, a partially rebuilt section of the eastern wing, reinforced with modern materials, but designed to blend with the original architecture. Inside was spartanly furnished with a cot, camp stove, folding, and table, and several locked metal cases. A battery-powered lantern cast stark shadows across the makeshift shelter. "It's not much," Tyler acknowledged, "but it keeps the rain off." He studied Lily with undisguised wonder. "I can't believe you're alive all these years." Lily took out her notepad and wrote, "Who told you I was dead?" Tyler's expression darkened as he read her note. "The same person who told me you'd been kidnapped, the same person who convinced Dad that the only way to keep me safe was to send me away to boarding school while they dealt with the crisis. Your supposed godfather, James Reynolds." Mason inhaled sharply. "Reynolds, the mining executive who bought out the neighboring properties?" "The very same," Tyler confirmed. "Dad's business partner and best friend. The man who held me while I cried at your funeral, Emily. The man who comforted me after Mom and Dad died in the tragic accident. The man who became my guardian and made sure I received my inheritance when I turned 21. A pittance compared to what the family holdings were actually worth." He moved to one of the metal cases, unlocked it, and withdrew a folder filled with documents. "It took me years to piece it together. Reynolds wanted the mining rights to the entire valley, but Dad refused to sell. He was going environmental, talking about conservation easements and sustainable forestry, Tyler's mouth twisted bitterly. Reynolds couldn't buy him out, so he found another way to gain control. He spread photographs and papers across the folding table. Property deeds, mineral surveys, mining permits, and surveillance photos of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. First, he eliminated the most vulnerable member of the family, you, Emily. A staged kidnapping with evidence planted to suggest you'd been killed during the abduction. Nobody. Just enough blood to be convincing. Mason leaned over the documents, scanning them rapidly. But she survived somehow. Tyler nodded. Reynolds didn't have the stomach to actually kill a child, apparently. My guess is he had you taken somewhere far away, expecting you'd never be found. A convenient accident to explain your memory loss and inability to communicate. His eyes met Lily's, filled with a mixture of grief and relief. What happened to you after that, Emily? Lily wrote rapidly. Car accident in Virginia. Foster care. No one knew who I was. Virginia, Tyler mused. Reynolds has a hunting lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Can't be a coincidence. Mason tapped. One of the documents, a fire investigation report. What about the fire itself? You're saying Reynolds arranged that too? After Emily's death, Dad became paranoid about security. He started gathering evidence against some of his business associates, including Reynolds. I think he was beginning to suspect the truth. Tyler picked up a surveillance photo of Reynolds meeting with two hard-looking men in an upscale restaurant. Reynolds couldn't risk being exposed. The fire eliminated both my parents and supposedly me as well. The official story was that I died trying to escape through my bedroom window. But you weren't there, Mason surmised. No, Tyler confirmed. I was at boarding school in Connecticut, hundreds of miles away. Reynolds showed up the next morning to break the news. My entire family gone in one night. He became my guardian, controlled my trust fund, and most importantly, gained effective control of all the Blackhawk holdings while I was still a minor. Lily studied her brother's face, searching for any sign of deception. She wrote, "Why did you let everyone think you were dead when you turned 18? Tyler's expression hardened. Because by then I knew what Reynolds had done, but I couldn't prove it. I realized the only way to beat him was at his own game, from the shadows. I created a new identity, built my own company, and started buying. Back our family's land piece by piece, right under his nose. T.J. Black, Mason murmured. Tyler James Blackhawk. Not very subtle, I admit, Tyler acknowledged with a grim smile. But I wanted him to know who was coming for him when the time was right. And now, Mason pressed, what's your endgame here? Tyler's smile faded. Now I have enough evidence to destroy him. The original mineral surveys that he falsified. Proof that he bribed officials to rezone protected lands. Testimony from the men he hired to set the fire. He turned to Lily. And now, miraculously, I have a surviving witness. You, Emily, the missing Blackhawk heir, returned from the dead. Lily wrote quickly, Why did Reynolds try to kill Mason? Tyler looked surprised. What? Mason explained about the attempt on his life 3 months earlier. Cabin fire, very similar to what happened here. Saw a vehicle with the Blackhawk mining logo afterward. Wasn't me, Tyler said firmly, but it makes sense. Reynolds must have learned I was buying back the properties. He'd want to eliminate anyone who might help me, including my uncle who's been asking uncomfortable questions for 20 years. He considered for a moment. He must have revived the old company name to frame me if things went wrong. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more complex and sinister than Lily had imagined. She wrote, What now? Before Tyler could answer, a sharp crack split the air. A gunshot, followed immediately by the ping of a bullet striking metal near the doorway. All three of them dropped to the floor as a second shot shattered the lantern, plunging the shelter. Into darkness. Reynolds, Tyler hissed, drawing his weapon. He must have had the survey team watching the property. Mason army-crawled to the window, peering cautiously around the frame. 2 figures by the tree line. Professional stance, not your typical security guards. Tyler nodded grimly. He uses ex-military contractors for sensitive work. They'll be well-trained and well-equipped. Another shot thudded into the wooden doorframe, sending splinters flying. From somewhere in the darkness outside, a male voice called out, "Mr. Black, we know you're in there with the girl and Walker. Come out now, and we can discuss this civilized-like." "Reynolds isn't even here," Tyler muttered. "Sends his attack. Dogs, but keeps his own hands clean." Mason signaled to Lily, directing her to move away from the windows and take cover behind one of the metal cases. "Where's your vehicle?" he asked Tyler quietly. "Around back. Keys are in my pocket." "Got a plan?" Tyler checked his ammunition. 3 against 2 would normally be good odds, but these guys won't play fair. One of us needs to get to my SUV. There's a satellite phone inside. We can call for help. Mason nodded. "I'll create a diversion. You get Emily to the vehicle." "No," Tyler countered. "You take her. I know these mountains better than anyone. I can lead them away, lose them in the forest." Outside, the gunmen were growing impatient. "Last chance, Black. Send out the girl and we'll let you walk away." Tyler's jaw tightened. "They want Emily. Reynolds must have somehow found out she's alive." "Doesn't matter," Mason said firmly. "No one's getting to her." As if in response to his declaration, a new sound joined the storm. 3 rapid gunshots from the far side of the clearing, followed by a cry of pain. "Ellis," Mason said with grim satisfaction. "That's our window. Go." Tyler switched off the safety on his pistol. "There's a tunnel," he said quickly. "Dad built it as an emergency exit. Entrance is under the metal case by the far wall. It comes out about 50 yards down slope, hidden by a stand of rhododendrons." Mason looked surprised. "Noah never mentioned a tunnel. He didn't trust you after your falling out," Tyler replied bluntly. "Now go. Get my sister out of here. I'll meet you at the North Ridge if I can shake these guys." Before Mason could protest, Tyler was moving, crouched low toward the door. He fired 2 shots in rapid succession, then darted outside, shouting to draw attention away from the shelter. Mason didn't waste the opportunity. He pulled Lily toward the metal case Tyler had indicated, dragging it aside to reveal a trapdoor set into the concrete floor. "Underground passage," he explained tersely. "Let's go." The tunnel was narrow and damp, barely tall enough for Mason to navigate in a crouch. Lily followed close behind, one hand on his belt to maintain contact in the absolute darkness. The sounds of gunfire grew muffled, then faded entirely as they moved deeper beneath the mountain. After what seemed like an eternity of blind crawling, Mason's outstretched hand found the end of the passage, a vertical shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall. "Ladder," he whispered. "I'll go first. Make sure it's clear." Lily waited, heart pounding, as Mason ascended and pushed open what sounded like a heavy metal cover. Rain immediately pattered down through the opening, along with the fresh scent of wet foliage. "All clear," Mason called softly, reaching down to help her up the last few rungs. They emerged in exactly the location Tyler had described, a dense thicket of rhododendrons that provided excellent cover. Through gaps in the vegetation, Lily could see the faint outline of the ruined house, now dark except for the occasional muzzle flash. As the gunfight continued, Mason oriented himself quickly. "North Ridge is that way," he said, pointing up a steep wooded slope. "But Tyler's SUV should be closer, just beyond that stand of pines." They moved carefully through the underbrush, the rain providing both concealment and challenges as the ground beneath their feet turned to slick mud. Twice they had to freeze as armed figures passed nearby, searching methodically through the forest. "Reynolds isn't taking any chances," Mason murmured. "He must have a whole team out here." After nearly 15 minutes of tense navigation, they reached the edge of a small clearing where Tyler's white SUV was parked, its glossy finish dulled by rain and mud. Mason gestured for Lily to stay hidden while he checked for guards, then waved her forward when he determined the area was secure. The vehicle was unlocked, and Mason quickly found the keys hidden above the sun visor, a common hiding place for those who frequent remote areas. "Get in," he instructed. "We'll head for the access road." But as Lily slid into the passenger seat, her foot knocked against something on the floor, a leather satchel that had spilled open, revealing stacks of bound currency and several passports. She picked one up, flipping it open to find Tyler's photograph beside the name Christopher James Martin. Mason saw it too. "Escape plan," he said grimly. "Your brother was preparing to disappear again." Before Lily could process the implications, the driver's side window exploded inward, showering them with safety glass as a powerful flashlight beam blinded them. "Out of the vehicle!" commanded a harsh voice. "Now!" Mason raised his hands slowly. "Take it easy. We're coming out." "Just the girl," the voice replied. "You stay put, Walker." Lily felt ice form in her veins. They knew Mason's name. This wasn't just about capturing trespassers. These men had specific targets. Mason's eyes met hers, conveying a silent message. "Be ready to move." "I said the girl gets out," the voice repeated. "Don't make me ask again." "All right," Mason replied, his tone deliberately placating. "She's coming. Give her a second. She's frightened." While the gunman's attention focused on Lily, Mason's hand moved with lightning speed toward the ignition. The SUV's engine roared to life as he simultaneously threw the vehicle into reverse, slamming into their assailant before he could react. "Hold on!" Mason shouted, spinning the wheel to execute a rapid J-turn that oriented them toward the access road. The SUV fish-tailed in the mud, then gained traction as Mason floored the accelerator. They burst from the clearing onto the narrow track, headlights illuminating the rain-slicked path ahead. Behind them, shouts and gunfire erupted as the remaining gunmen realized their quarry was escaping. "Satellite phone!" Mason barked, eyes fixed on the treacherous road. "Check the center console." Lily found the device and handed it to him. Without taking his eyes off the road, Mason punched in a number from memory, then passed it back to her. "When they answer, write down the coordinates I give you." The call connected, and a professional voice responded, "Marshal Security, go ahead." Mason rattled off a string of numbers, latitude and longitude coordinates, followed by Code Blackhawk, multiple hostile elements, request immediate extraction for 2 individuals. "Acknowledged," came the crisp reply. "ETA 20 minutes. At those coordinates, authentication phrase required." "The crows fly at midnight," Mason responded without hesitation. "Confirmed. Proceed to extraction point. Be advised, this frequency may be compromised." The call ended, and Mason took the next. Turn at a speed that sent them sliding dangerously close to the edge of the road. "Private security firm," he explained, noting Lily's confused expression. "Old colleagues from my military days. They'll have a helicopter at the rendezvous point." Lily scribbled hastily, "What about Tyler? And Ellis? Ellis can take care of himself. He's got extraction protocols in place too." Mason's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "As for your brother, I'm not sure we can trust him, Emily, not yet." Before she could respond, the back window shattered as a bullet passed between them, embedding itself in the dashboard. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared. Another vehicle in pursuit. "Hang on," Mason warned, pushing the SUV to its limits as they raced down the mountain, chased by both human predators and the relentless storm that continued to pound the ancient peaks around them. The SUV fishtailed around another hairpin turn. Tires struggling for purchase on the rain-slicked mountain road. In the passenger seat, Lily braced herself against the door as Mason navigated the treacherous descent with grim determination. Behind them, the headlights of their pursuers weaved through the darkness, sometimes falling back on the tightest curves only to reappear with renewed intensity moments later. "They know these roads," Mason muttered, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "Professional drivers, military training." Another bullet pinged off the rear of the vehicle, and Lily ducked instinctively. They'd been lucky so far. The storm and the winding road made accurate shooting nearly impossible at speed. But luck had a tendency to run out at the worst possible moment. 5 minutes to the extraction point," Mason announced, checking the coordinates on the GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. "Just need to stay ahead of them until then." The road widened slightly as they approached a switchback, providing their pursuers with a better angle. Glass exploded as a bullet shattered the side mirror near Lily's head. Mason swerved hard, then somehow impossibly accelerated through the turn. "They're trying to take out the tires," he explained tersely. "Disable rather than destroy. They want us alive, you at least." The significance wasn't lost on Lily. Reynolds wanted her silenced, but he needed to be certain. A body to confirm that Emily Blackhawk was truly dead this time, with no possibility of resurrection. The forest on either side of the road began to thin, giving way to a clearing that stretched toward the edge of a cliff. In the distance, the faint winking of aircraft warning lights revealed their destination, a radio tower installation perched on a plateau overlooking the valley. "Marshall's pilot will land there," Mason said, nodding toward the clearing. "We just need to reach it." They were perhaps a quarter-mile from safety when their pursuers made their move. The vehicle behind them surged forward, ramming their rear bumper with calculated precision. The SUV fishtailed wildly, and Mason fought to maintain control as they skidded sideways. Another impact, more deliberate this time, sent them spinning toward the edge of the road, where a steep embankment dropped into darkness. "Brace!" Mason shouted as the SUV tipped precariously, then rolled once before coming to rest on its side against a massive pine that had halted their descent down the slope. For a moment, the only sounds were the idling engine, the hissing of damaged components, and the relentless drumming of rain on metal. Lily hung suspended by her seatbelt, disoriented but apparently uninjured. Beside her, Mason groaned, a dark stain spreading across his left shoulder where he'd impacted the door. "Can you move?" he asked, his voice strained. She nodded, already, fumbling with her seatbelt release. Above them, doors slammed as their pursuers exited their vehicle. "Quickly," Mason urged. "Out my side, the trees blocking your door." Lily clambered across the center console, careful to avoid putting weight on Mason's injured shoulder. He pushed the driver's door open with his boots, creating a narrow passage upward. The angle was awkward, but Lily managed to squeeze through, emerging onto the mud-slicked embankment just as flashlight beams began sweeping the area. "There, by the wreck!" a voice called. Mason emerged behind her, grimacing with pain, but moving with determined efficiency. "Run for the tower," he instructed, drawing his pistol. "I'll hold them off." Lily shook her head vehemently, grabbing his uninjured arm. "This isn't a debate," he growled. "They need you alive, but I'm expendable. Get to the extraction point. Marshall's team will protect you." The flashlight beams were closing in, and with them came the sound of men moving through the underbrush. Mason gave her a gentle push. "Go. Live. Find the truth." With one last agonized look at her uncle, Lily turned and began scrambling up the steep embankment, using exposed roots and saplings as handholds. Behind her, gunfire erupted, 2 shots, then 3 more in rapid succession. She didn't look back, couldn't afford to. Every fiber of her being screamed to return to Mason, but she forced herself onward, upward toward the distant promise of safety. She reached the road and sprinted toward the clearing, lungs burning, legs trembling with exertion. The radio tower loomed ahead, its red lights pulsing through the rain like a mechanical heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the rhythmic thudding of helicopter rotors growing steadily louder. A figure materialized from the shadows ahead, blocking her path. Lily skidded to a halt, frantically looking for an escape route, when the figure called out, "Emily, it's me!" Tyler, emerged into a pool of light cast by the tower's security lamps. His clothes were torn and muddy, and blood streaked his left cheek from a deep gash near his hairline, but he was undeniably alive. "Where's Mason?" he demanded. Lily gestured frantically back toward the crash site, miming gunfire. Tyler's expression hardened. "Reynolds' men?" She nodded. "How many?" She held up 3 fingers, then corrected herself with a 4th as she remembered the driver. "The helicopter's almost here," Tyler said, checking a device strapped to his wrist that resembled a military-grade. "GPS unit, 2 minutes out. We need to secure the landing zone." Lily grabbed his arm, pointing back down the road with desperate insistence. "We can't help Mason if we're dead," Tyler argued. "These men are professionals. Our best chance is to get to safety, then bring back reinforcements." The logic was sound, but it did nothing to ease the knot of guilt and fear twisting in Lily's stomach. She'd abandoned Mason, left him wounded and outnumbered. Whatever their blood relation might be, he was the only person who had cared enough to search for her all these years. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, a black silhouette. Against the stormy sky, rotors beating a furious rhythm as it descended toward the clearing. At the same moment, headlights appeared on the road behind them. The pursuers had regrouped and were closing in. "Go!" Tyler shouted, pushing her toward the landing zone. "I'll cover you!" He drew his pistol and took position behind a concrete barrier that housed electrical equipment for the tower. Lily sprinted for the clearing, waving her arms to signal the pilot. The helicopter touched down in a maelstrom of wind and rain, its side door sliding open to reveal a man in tactical gear gesturing urgently for her to board. Lily hesitated, looking back toward Tyler. "Move!" the tactical operator shouted over the roar of the rotors. "Now!" Gunfire erupted from the road as the pursuers opened fire on the helicopter. The tactical operator returned fire with a compact automatic weapon, providing cover as Lily finally made her decision and raced for the aircraft. She had just reached the door when a cry of pain from behind made her turn. Tyler lay sprawled on the ground, clutching his leg where a bullet had found its mark. He tried to rise, only to collapse again as his injured limb gave way beneath him. Without conscious thought, Lily reversed course, ignoring the operator's shouts as she ran back toward her fallen brother. Bullets whined past her, kicking up dirt at her feet, but some combination of luck and poor visibility in the storm protected her until she reached Tyler's side. He looked up at her in disbelief. "What are you doing? Get out of here!" She ignored him, hooking her arms beneath his shoulders and attempting to drag him toward the helicopter. He was far too heavy for her to move effectively, but she refused to abandon him. "For God's sake, Emily," Tyler gasped through gritted teeth, "don't throw your life away for me. I'm not worth it." The approaching headlights illuminated them in stark relief, like actors on a stage. The pursuing vehicle skidded to a halt, perhaps 30 yards away, and doors flew open as armed men deployed to strategic positions. "Stay where you are," a voice commanded through a handheld megaphone. "Hands where we can see them." Lily positioned herself protectively in front of Tyler, arms spread wide, as if her small frame could somehow shield him from what was coming. She faced the approaching men defiantly, silently daring them to shoot an unarmed woman. "Stand aside. Miss Blackhawk," the voice continued, more conciliatory now, "we have no quarrel with you. Mr. Reynolds simply wishes to speak with you about a family matter." Tyler laughed bitterly. "A family matter? That's rich, coming from the man who murdered our parents." The lead gunman, a broad-shouldered figure with close-cropped grey hair and the bearing of a career soldier, stepped forward. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Blackhawk. Or should I call you Mr. Black? Or perhaps Mr. Martin?" He gestured to his companions. "Secure them both. Mr. Reynolds is waiting." The men moved forward with practiced efficiency, weapons trained on the siblings. Lily tensed, preparing for she knew not what. Capture, certainly, and quite possibly death once Reynolds had what he wanted. The distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle split the air, and one of the approaching men dropped, clutching his knee. A second shot followed immediately, taking down another gunman with similar precision. "Sniper!" the leader shouted, diving for cover behind their vehicle. From the tree line at the edge of the clearing emerged a familiar figure. Ellis, rifle braced, against his shoulder as he methodically targeted each of the remaining gunmen with disabling shots to extremities. The distraction provided the helicopter crew the opportunity they needed. Two tactical operators sprinted from the aircraft, laying down suppressive fire as they reached Lily and Tyler. With practiced efficiency, they lifted Tyler between them and began moving back toward the waiting helicopter. "The old man's good," one of the operators commented as another precision shot found its mark. "Ex-military? Special Forces," Tyler confirmed through pain-clenched teeth. "Vietnam era." They had almost reached the helicopter when the lead gunman rose from behind his cover, an assault rifle raised. Before he could fire, a figure tackled him from behind, driving him to the ground with desperate ferocity. "Mason!" Lily mouthed silently, recognizing her uncle despite the blood that matted his hair and stained his clothing. The two men grappled in the mud, each fighting for control of the rifle. For a moment, it seemed Mason's injured shoulder would prove his undoing as the gunman gained the upper hand. Then Ellis's rifle cracked once more, and the gunman collapsed with a cry of pain, clutching his shattered wrist. Mason staggered to his feet and lurched toward the helicopter, where Lily waited at the door, hand extended. Beyond him, Ellis was already retreating into the forest, his role in the extraction complete. "Stubborn girl," Mason gasped as he reached her, allowing her to help him aboard. "Should have left when I told you to." The helicopter lifted off as soon as the door slid closed, banking sharply to avoid the sporadic fire still coming from the remaining gunmen below. Inside, medics were already attending to Tyler's leg wound and Mason's shoulder. "That was too close," said one of the tactical operators. A woman with short-cropped blonde hair and the calloused hands of someone accustomed to field work. She fixed Lily with an appraising stare. "You must be Emily Blackhawk. Mason's been looking for you." "For a very long time." Lily nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the past hours, the revelations, the violence, the narrow escape. She fumbled for her notepad, only to realize she'd lost it sometime during their flight through the forest. "She can't speak," Tyler explained, wincing as a medic extracted the bullet from his thigh. "Injury from childhood," the woman nodded sympathetically. "I'm Alexis Marshall. My father founded Marshall Security after retiring from Delta Force. Mason's one of our biggest clients." She glanced at the wounded men. "Though he usually avoids getting shot when he calls us." Mason managed a pained smile. "Lost my touch in my old age." "Where are we going?" Tyler asked, looking out the window as the helicopter continued to climb, leaving the mountains behind. "Private airfield just outside Asheville," Alexis replied. "We have a medical team standing by and a secure facility where you can lie low until we figure out our next move." Tyler shook his head. "We need to get to Charlotte. That's where Reynolds is based now. I have evidence in a safe deposit box there, everything we need to bring him down." "You're in no condition to go anywhere except a hospital," the medic interjected firmly. "Both of you need proper medical attention." "The evidence won't matter if Reynolds gets to it first," Tyler argued. "Once he knows I'm still alive, he'll move heaven and earth to destroy anything that could incriminate him." Mason considered this, then turned to Alexis. "How quickly can you get a team to Charlotte?" 4 hours. Maybe 3 if I pull in some local assets," she replied, but without knowing exactly what we're looking for or where. Tyler grimaced as the medic applied pressure to his wound. "First National Bank of Charlotte, downtown branch, box 1476. Passphrase is, Coldwater Creek claims its due." Alexis nodded and moved to the front of the helicopter to confer with the pilot and relay instructions through a secure communication system. Lily sat beside Tyler, studying her brother's face in the harsh interior lighting of the aircraft. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she was struck by how exhausted he looked, not just from the night's ordeal, but from carrying the weight of the past 20 years. He caught her gaze and managed a wry smile. "Not exactly the family reunion I imagined," he said. "I had this whole plan, you know. Once I had enough evidence against Reynolds, I was going to find Mason, tell him everything. I never dreamed you. We're still alive, Emily. If I'd known..." She squeezed his hand, offering wordless forgiveness for what he couldn't have known. "Reynolds told me you were dead," Tyler continued, his voice hollow with old grief. "Said the kidnappers panicked when you struggled, hurt you by accident. He showed me photos of a little girl's body, your body, supposedly. I was only 16, what did I know? I believed him. Mason joined them, his shoulder now properly bandaged. Reynolds played us all. He told me Tyler had become unstable after your disappearance, that he was making wild accusations. When the fire happened, it was easy to believe the worst. He isolated us from each other," Tyler agreed, "made sure we were too busy suspecting one another to look at him." Alexis returned from the cockpit. "Teams mobilizing in Charlotte. They'll secure the evidence before Reynolds even knows we've left the mountains." She checked her watch. "We'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Medical team will transport you both to our facility." "And Emily?" Mason asked. "She stays with us," Alexis said firmly. "If Reynolds is as connected as you say, hospitals aren't safe. We have doctors on staff who can evaluate her condition, including specialists in trauma-induced speech disorders." For the first time, Lily felt a flicker of hope, not just for justice against the man who had destroyed her family, but for the possibility of reclaiming her voice, her memory, her identity. The helicopter banked gently, beginning its descent. Toward the distant glow of Asheville, below the landscape unfurled in patches of darkness and light, forests and farms, towns and highways, the mundane geography of ordinary lives untouched by the kind of tragedy that had shaped the Black Hawk. "Siblings," Tyler shifted, grimacing with pain. "There's something else you should know," he said, addressing both Lily and Mason. "Something I discovered while tracking Reynolds' operations." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. "The fire that night, it wasn't just about the mining rights. There was something else Dad had discovered, something potentially more damaging to Reynolds and his associates." "What kind of something?" Mason pressed. "I'm not entirely sure," Tyler admitted. "But in the weeks before the fire, Dad was making inquiries about shell companies moving large sums of money through offshore accounts. Reynolds' name appeared in some of the documentation, along with several high-ranking political figures." "Money laundering?" Alexis suggested. "Maybe, or worse." Tyler's expression was grim. "Whatever it was worth killing for. And the operation didn't end with our parents' deaths. It's continued for 20 years under different corporate entities, all ultimately controlled by Reynolds. The implications hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about a land grab or mining rights. It was potentially something that reached into the highest levels of power, something that could bring down not just James Reynolds, but anyone connected to his illicit operations. "If that's true," Mason said slowly, "then Reynolds won't stop coming after us, evidence or no evidence. Men like him don't leave loose ends." "Then we don't give him the chance," Tyler replied, a dangerous edge to his voice. "We take everything we have to the FBI, the media, anyone who will listen. We make it so public that silencing us becomes more dangerous than facing justice." Lily took out a small pocket notebook she'd found in the helicopter's emergency kit and wrote with a stubby pencil, "What about my memory? My voice?" Mason read her note and squeezed her shoulder gently. "One battle at a time, Emily. First we get you and Tyler proper medical care, then we secure the evidence against Reynolds. After that, we'll find the best specialists in the country to help with your recovery." Tyler nodded agreement. Mason's right, and even if your memory never fully returns, even if your voice remains silent, you've found your family. You know who you are now? Emily Rose Blackhawk, daughter of Noah and Maria, sister of Tyler. He managed a tired smile, and apparently every bit as stubborn as our mother was. The helicopter touched down on a private landing pad illuminated by floodlights. Medical personnel rushed forward with gurneys as the rotors slowed. As Tyler and Mason were transferred to the waiting medical transport, Lily followed closely, unwilling to let either man out of her sight. 24 hours ago, she had been Lily Taylor, voiceless waitress at a small-town diner, a woman with no past and little hope for a different future. Now she was Emily Blackhawk, survivor and heir, a woman with a family, a history, and most importantly, a voice waiting to be reclaimed. As the medical transport pulled away from the airfield, she gazed back at the distant mountains where both tragedy and revelation had been born. Somewhere in those ancient peaks, the truth of her past had waited patiently for 20 years. Now it seemed the time for waiting was finally over. The Marshall Security Compound resembled a luxury rehabilitation center more than a fortress. A sprawling main building of wood and glass nestled among towering pines, with smaller cabins scattered throughout the 20-acre property. The entire perimeter was secured by state-of-the-art surveillance systems and patrolled by highly trained personnel who moved with the calm efficiency of those accustomed to protecting high-value clients. Lily, or Emily, as she was gradually becoming accustomed to thinking of herself, stood at the window of her assigned suite, watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains in gold and amber. She'd slept fitfully, her dreams filled with fragmented images, a wooden swing, a lullaby, flames reaching toward a star-filled sky. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Sophia Chen entered, carrying a tablet and the warm smile that had been a constant during Emily's evaluation the previous day. "Good morning," the doctor greeted her. "How are you feeling?" Emily gave a non-committal gesture that suggested neither good nor bad, simply present, surviving. "I've reviewed your medical records from Virginia," Dr. Chen said, taking a seat at the small table by the window. "The damage to your vocal cords was significant, but not necessarily permanent. The trauma, combined with the psychological shock of losing your memory, likely created a psychosomatic block that reinforced the physical injury." Emily sat across from her, expression cautiously hopeful. "With the right combination of reconstructive surgery and intensive therapy, there's a good chance you could regain some vocal function," Dr. Chen continued. "It won't happen overnight, and your voice might not be exactly as it was before, but the possibility exists." For 20 years, Emily had lived in silence, communicating through notes and gestures, accepted that her voice was lost forever. Now, like so much else in her life, that certainty had been upended. She scribbled on the notepad the hospital had provided. Memory. Could that return too? Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "The mind is remarkably resilient, sometimes returning to significant places or encountering strong sensory triggers can unlock suppressed memories. Your reunion with your brother and uncle has already started that process, hasn't it?" It was true. Since meeting Mason and Tyler, fragments had begun surfacing. Disconnected moments, sensations, emotions. Nothing coherent yet, but enough to suggest that her past wasn't entirely lost, merely buried beneath layers of protective forgetting. "Speaking of your brother," Dr. Chen added, "he's asking to see you. He's still confined to bed rest, but if you'd like to visit him..." Emily nodded eagerly and followed the doctor through the facility's wide corridors. They passed security checkpoints, where armed personnel nodded respectfully, evidence of the continued threat Reynolds posed. The room they eventually entered was spacious and well-appointed, more a luxury hotel suite than a hospital room, with medical equipment discreetly integrated into the decor. Tyler lay propped against pillows, his injured leg elevated and bandaged. His face brightened when he saw her. "There's my heroic sister," he said warmly. "The doctors tell me I'll keep the leg, thanks to you. Not many people would run back into gunfire for someone they just met." Emily shrugged, embarrassed by his praise. She hadn't thought about heroism in that moment, only that she couldn't bear to lose her newly discovered brother before truly knowing him. Dr. Chen excused herself, leaving the siblings alone. Emily sat in the chair beside Tyler's bed, struck again by the strange familiar unfamiliarity of his face. He might be a stranger in many ways, but their shared blood was undeniable. "Marshall's team secured the evidence in Charlotte," Tyler said, getting straight to business. "Everything I've gathered over the past 5 years, financial records, witness statements, geological surveys that were falsified, communications between Reynolds and his accomplices." He smiled grimly. "Enough to bury him 10 times over," Emily wrote. "What happens now?" "Alexis has contacts in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're reviewing everything as we speak. With luck, they'll move against Reynolds within days." Tyler's expression darkened. "The problem is, if we go public now, we expose ourselves. Reynolds still has resources, connections. Even from prison he could reach us. We can't hide forever," Emily wrote. "No," Tyler agreed, "but we can be strategic. Alexis is arranging for us to give sworn depositions today. You, me, and Mason. Once those are officially recorded, killing us becomes pointless. The damage would already be done." The door opened, and Mason entered, his left arm in a sling, but otherwise looking considerably better than he had during their helicopter evacuation. "Morning, Blackhawks," he greeted them. "Plotting Reynolds' downfall without me?" "Just updating Emily," Tyler replied. "Did you speak with Alexis about the FBI?" Mason nodded, taking a seat on the windowsill. "Agent Donovan arrives in 2 hours. She's bringing a federal prosecutor and a court stenographer." He turned to Emily. "I know this is a lot to process all at once. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emily nodded firmly. Though she couldn't speak her testimony, she could write it, sign it, make it official. After 20 years of unintentional anonymity, she was ready to reclaim her identity and help bring her parents' murderer to justice. "There's something else we need to discuss," Mason said, his tone growing serious. "The safe room beneath the house. We never had a chance to investigate it with Reynolds' men showing up." Tyler looked intrigued. "You think there's something there worth finding after all this time?" "Your father was paranoid about security during those final months," Mason replied. "If he had evidence against Reynolds beyond what you've already gathered, that's where he would have hidden it." "The fire couldn't have reached it," Tyler mused. "Concrete walls, steel door, and Reynolds never knew about it, or he would have torn the place apart looking for anything incriminating." Emily wrote, "We should go back." "Not yet," Mason cautioned. "Reynolds still has men watching the property. Once the FBI moves against him, his operation will be thrown into chaos. That's our window." A knock at the door preceded Alexis Marshall's entrance. Unlike the day before, when she'd been dressed for tactical operations, today she wore a tailored charcoal suit that projected professional authority. "The FBI team called," she announced without preamble. "They're moving the timeline up. Reynolds is liquidating assets and booking international flights. They think he's preparing to flee the country." Tyler swore under his breath. "He knows we have the evidence." "Most likely," Alexis agreed. "One of his political connections must have tipped him off. Agent Donovan is requesting an arrest warrant. But with Reynolds' resources, there's concern he could be gone before it's executed." "Then we need to accelerate our plans too," Mason said. "How quickly can you get us back to the Blackhawk property?" Alexis raised an eyebrow. You're seriously proposing to go back to the site where you were nearly killed less than 24 hours ago? Reynolds will have pulled his men from the property to support his escape, Mason argued. It might be our only chance to access the safe room before he's in the wind. After a moment's consideration, Alexis nodded. I can have a team ready in 30 minutes, but Tyler stays here. He's in no condition to travel. Tyler started to protest, but Emily laid a hand on his arm, silencing him with a look that brooked no argument. He sighed in resignation. Fine, but you're not going without backup. He turned to Alexis. There's someone else who can help, a local who knows those mountains better than anyone. Ellis, Mason nodded. Already thought of that. He called this morning from a secure line. He's waiting for our signal. Preparations moved with military precision after that. Within the hour, Emily found herself boarding a helicopter once more, this time dressed in tactical gear that Alexis had provided. Mason sat beside her, his injured shoulder freshly bandaged, but his determination unwavering. You don't have to. Do this, he told her as the helicopter lifted off. You could stay with Tyler, give your deposition, let us handle the safe room. Emily shook her head firmly and wrote on her notepad, my parents, my past. I need to be there. Mason studied her, a mixture of pride and concern in his weathered features. You're a Black Hawk, all right. Noah had that same stubborn streak. His expression softened. He would be proud of you, Emily, so would Maria. The helicopter banked toward the mountains, leaving the security of the Marshall compound behind. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps answers to questions Emily had never known to ask. The birthmark on her arm seemed to tingle with anticipation, as if the crescent moon that linked her to her mother was guiding her home at last. The helicopter set down in a clearing half a mile from the Black Hawk property, the pilots keeping the engines running for a quick departure if needed. Emily, Mason, and 2 Marshall security operatives disembarked, moving immediately into the cover of the forest. Ellis materialized from the trees like a woodland spirit, shotgun cradled in his arms and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Perimeters. In clear, he reported gruffly. No sign of Reynolds' men, but there's fresh tire tracks on the access road. Someone's been here since yesterday. Mason nodded grimly. Reynolds himself, maybe. Retrieving anything that might link him to the property. Before he runs. They moved through the forest with practiced stealth, the security team taking point and rear guard, while Ellis guided them along a route that avoided the main trails. The rain had stopped, but the ground remained treacherously slick, forcing them to proceed with caution. The ruins of the Black Hawk home emerged from the morning mist, strangely peaceful in the aftermath of the previous night's violence. Survey equipment lay abandoned, some pieces damaged by gunfire. Tyler's SUV had been removed, leaving only dark stains on the wet ground where fluids had leaked from the damaged vehicle. There. Mason pointed to what appeared to be a collapsed section of the foundation near where the kitchen would have stood. That's where Noah installed the entrance to the safe room. We'll need to clear the debris. Working quickly and quietly, they removed charred beams and crumbling masonry to reveal a trapdoor of blackened metal, its existence cleverly disguised as part of the foundation. A sophisticated keypad lock, protected by a weatherproof cover, secured the entrance. Noah would have used a family-significant code, Mason murmured, studying the numeric pad. Tyler's birthday? No, too obvious. Emily touched his arm, an idea forming. She took out her notepad and wrote, Try 41702. Your birthday, Mason realized. He punched in the numbers, and the lock emitted a soft click of acceptance. With Ellis's help, he lifted the heavy door, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I'll go first, one of the security operatives volunteered, activating the tactical light mounted on his weapon. Dr. Blackhawk, you should stay here with... I'm going, Emily interrupted with a shake of her head, already following the operative. Down the stairs. Her determination left no room for argument. The air below was surprisingly fresh, suggesting a ventilation system that had continued functioning long after the house above had been destroyed. The safe room itself was smaller than Emily had imagined, perhaps 12 feet square, with reinforced concrete walls lined with metal shelving. A desk occupied one corner, an old computer still set up as if waiting for its owner's return. Noah thought of everything, Mason said, examining the ventilation system. Solar-powered battery backup, air filtration. He designed this place to withstand anything. The security operative was checking the shelves, which held emergency supplies, water, and several fireproof document cases. These look promising, he said, placing the cases on the desk. Emily approached almost reverently, feeling as if she were crossing a threshold into her past. This room had remained untouched since her father had last sealed it, a perfect time capsule of the life that had been stolen from her. The first case contained what appeared to be standard legal documents, property deeds, insurance policies, wills. The second held more personal items, birth certificates for Tyler and Emily, passports, school records. Emily's fingers trembled as she touched these artifacts of her forgotten childhood, tangible proof of her existence as Emily Rose Blackhawk. The third case, however, contained what they had truly come for, a thick folder labeled simply R, and beside it a portable hard drive and several data disks carefully preserved in protective sleeves. "This is it," Mason said, carefully opening the folder. Inside were documents detailing financial transactions between Reynolds and various shell companies, photocopies of offshore account statements, and photographs of Reynolds meeting with several high-ranking officials in locations that appeared designed for privacy. Your father was building a case, Mason realized. Not just about the mining rights, but about a systematic corruption scheme reaching into the highest levels of state government. He looked at Emily. This is what Reynolds killed for, not just mineral rights, but to protect himself and his political allies from exposure. As the security operative began photographing each document with a specialized camera that would transmit the images directly to the FBI team, Emily continued exploring the safe room. On the desk sat a framed photograph of the entire Blackhawk family, the same image Mason had shown her, but larger and unweathered by time. Beside it was a small wooden box with a simple latch. Curious, she opened it and found a collection of small items, a child's charm bracelet, a polished stone, several pressed flowers, and a small digital recorder. Instinctively, she picked up the recorder and pressed play. "Emily, sweetheart," a woman's voice emerged, warm and melodic with the faintest trace of a Spanish accent. "I know you're scared right now, but remember what I told you. Even when we can't see each other, we're still connected, right here." The sound of a finger tapping gently. "In our hearts, and by the moons we share." Emily's hand flew to her birthmark, a jolt of recognition surging through her body. Her mother's voice. She pressed the recorder closer to her ear as the message continued. "Daddy and I had to send Tyler away to keep him safe, and now we need to hide you too, just for a little while. Uncle Mason is coming to take you to a special place where the bad men can't find you. Be brave, my darling. Remember who you are. You're a Blackhawk, strong, smart, and so very loved." Tears streamed down Emily's face as the recording ended. This was no generic message. This was specific to her disappearance. Her parents had been planning to send her away with Mason to protect her from Reynolds. "They knew," she wrote shakily, showing the note to Mason. "They were trying to save us." Mason took the recorder, his expression stunned. "I never received any message from Noah about taking you somewhere safe. The night before the fire, I was in Seattle on business. By the time I heard about the tragedy, it was too late." His face darkened with 2 decades of belated understanding. Reynolds must have intercepted Noah's communication, realized the family was about to expose him, and acted before they could get you to safety. Emily continued searching through the box, finding at the bottom a sealed envelope with, "For Emily. When it's safe," written in elegant handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it, unfolding several pages of her mother's handwriting. "My dearest Emily," it began. "If you're reading this, then something has happened to your father and me, but you are safe, as we prayed you would be. There is so much I need to tell you." As Emily read her mother's words, explaining their suspicions about Reynolds, their discovery of his corruption, their desperate attempts to gather evidence while protecting their children, long buried, memories began stirring like leaves in a gentle wind. The wooden porch swing, her mother's garden, her father's laugh, Tyler teaching her to skip stones across the creek. A commotion above interrupted her reading, voices urgent but not alarmed. One of the security operatives hurried down the stairs. "FBI just moved on Reynolds," he reported. "They arrested him at his private airfield trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. They found evidence linking him directly to the fire, including payment records to the arsonists." "It's over," Mason breathed, relief evident in his voice. "After 20 years, it's finally over." But for Emily, it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. As they gathered the evidence and prepared to leave the safe room, she tucked her mother's letter and the small recorder into her pocket. Precious. Links to the family she'd lost and found again. 3 months later, Emily stood in the sunlit garden of the rehabilitation center, focusing intently on the exercise Dr. Chen had prescribed. The surgical repair of her vocal cords had been successful, but relearning speech, after 20 years of silence, required patience and perseverance. "Emily," she practiced, the sound rough but unmistakable. "My name is Emily." From a nearby bench, Tyler watched with undisguised joy, his own recovery progressing well enough that he now walked with only a slight limp. Beyond him, Mason stood, talking with Alexis Marshall, their heads bent together over construction plans for the new Blackhawk family home being built on the old property, a symbol of reclamation and renewal. Reynolds' arrest had triggered investigations that brought down 3 state officials and exposed decades of corruption. The siblings had been vindicated, their family name cleared, their parents' deaths finally acknowledged as the murders they were. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. "You're getting stronger every day," Tyler encouraged as Emily completed her exercises and joined him on the bench. She nodded, taking out her notepad, still easier than speaking for complex thoughts. "It feels right finding my voice as Emily. Mom would be proud," Tyler said, his eyes drifting to the crescent birthmark on her arm, the mark that had guided Mason to her, the sign that had linked her to a past she'd thought forever lost. Emily smiled, touching the birthmark gently. Once, it had been nothing more than a curious shape on her skin, a meaningless quirk of biology. Now she understood it was so much more. A celestial signature linking generations, a beacon that had guided her home when all seemed lost. For the first time in 20 years, Emily Blackhawk gazed toward the future with hope rather than resignation, her voice gradually returning, her family restored, her identity reclaimed. The silent, isolated existence of Lily Taylor was behind her now, a chrysalis shed to reveal the woman she was always meant to be. "My name is Emily Rose Blackhawk," she whispered to the mountain breeze, each word a victory, each syllable a step forward on a journey that had only just begun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.